Her name is Mercy. I am sick. I am dying. I cannot give her what she needs.
Once upon a time in the heart of Lagos Island, where rich and poor lived side by side, there lived a woman named Faith Okafor. She was the kind of woman people stopped to stare at when she walked into a room. Not just because she was beautiful, but because she carried herself like someone who had survived fire. Tall, dark-skinned, with sharp features and eyes that never quite smiled. Faith always wore simple clothes, nothing fancy, and she lived in a small flat near the Third Mainland Bridge. People said she was cold. They said she had no warmth, no softness, just walls. And they were right. Faith was alone. Her husband had died 4 years ago in a car accident, and they never had children. Since then, she worked as a pharmacist at a busy hospital, came home to silence, and lived like someone waiting for permission to feel again. But that life was about to change. All because of one stormy Thursday night. The sky had turned black that evening, the kind of black that makes you forget there was ever such a thing as sunlight. Thick clouds covered the moon and blotted out the stars. Rain started to fall slowly at first, then heavier and angrier, like the sky itself was weeping for something lost. The sound of thunder rolled across the city like drums of war, deep and ominous, shaking the windows of buildings and making car alarms scream. Faith sat in the back seat of a taxi, staring out the window at the chaos. The driver, a middle-aged man named Emeka with graying hair and tired eyes, was driving slowly through traffic on Echo Bridge, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as the wipers struggled against the downpour. "Madam, this rain is no small matter," he said, glancing at the rear-view mirror, his voice carrying that familiar Nigerian mix of concern and resignation. "I haven't seen rain like this in a long time. The road will start flooding soon." Faith didn't answer. She was staring at her phone, her thumb hovering over a message that had just come in from her younger sister, Lilith. The message read, "Faith, please pick up my call. It's important. I know you're angry with me, but I really need to talk to you. Please." Faith sighed and put the phone away, her jaw tightening. Lilith always had something important, usually money she needed to borrow and never pay back. Usually some crisis that wasn't really a crisis at all, just poor planning and poorer choices. Faith had stopped answering Lilith's calls 3 months ago after lending her 50,000 naira that vanished into thin air, along with Lilith's promises to pay it back. Outside, the rain splashed hard against the windshield, creating a wall of water that made it almost impossible to see. People were running everywhere, trying to find shelter under shop awnings and bus stops. Women held plastic bags over their heads. Men ran with newspapers. Children laughed and splashed through puddles, not yet understanding that water could be dangerous. Cars honked endlessly, creating a symphony of frustration. Street hawkers shouted, trying to sell their goods even in the storm. Their voices barely audible over the thunder. Everyone looked like they were escaping something, running from something they couldn't name. Then the car stopped. A traffic jam ahead, red taillights stretching into the distance like a river of blood. The wipers moved back and forth, squeaking rhythmically. Emeka was about to complain when Faith raised her hand slightly, her body tensing. "Wait, what's that?" she asked, leaning forward, her eyes fixed on something outside. Emeka looked where she was pointing, squinting through the rain-blurred window. "What's what, madam?" "There, near that bridge pillar. That box. Do you see it?" Emeka squinted harder, his face skeptical. "Madam, don't be rubbish. People always dump things there. Every day. Rubbish, rubbish, rubbish." But Faith wasn't listening. Her eyes were fixed on the box, a cardboard box that looked like it had once held electronics, now soaked and sagging. It was moving, not swaying in the wind, but moving, deliberately, like something alive was inside it. She leaned forward, her heart beginning to pound for reasons she couldn't explain. "Stop the car." Emeka looked confused, his eyebrows raising. "Madam? I said stop the car, now." Her voice was sharp, commanding, with an edge she hadn't heard in her own voice in years. He pulled over to the side, the car tires splashing through deep puddles. "Madam, what do you want to do? This rain." Faith opened the door and stepped into the rain, ignoring the water that soaked her dress immediately, plastering the fabric to her skin. The cold hit her like a slap, and within seconds she was drenched, her hair sticking to her face, water running into her eyes. Emeka shouted after her, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Madam, you will catch a cold. Oh, please come back. This thing doesn't make sense." But Faith was already running. She ran through the rain, through puddles that splashed up to her knees, straight toward the box under the bridge. Her shoes filled with water, her blouse became transparent, her breath came in gasps. But she kept running, driven by something she couldn't name, some instinct that screamed at her to move faster, faster, before it was too late. When she reached the box, she stopped so suddenly that she almost slipped. Her breath caught in her throat. Her hands flew to her mouth. Inside the box was a baby. A tiny baby girl, no more than a few weeks old, wrapped in a wet yellow towel that had once been bright, but was now dingy and soaked through. The baby was crying, but weakly, so weakly that Faith could barely hear it over the rain. Her small face was red and wrinkled, her eyes squeezed shut, her mouth open in a silent scream that had no strength behind it. Her body was shaking from the cold, trembling so violently that Faith thought she might break apart. "Jesus Christ," Faith whispered, her voice cracking. "Jesus Christ, who would do this?" Her hands trembled as she bent down, her knees sinking into the wet ground. She picked up the baby carefully, oh so carefully, holding her close to her chest, trying to shield her from the rain with her own body. The baby was ice cold, too cold. Her skin had a bluish tint that made Faith's stomach twist with fear. "It's okay," Faith whispered, her voice breaking. "It's okay, I've got you. You're safe now. You're safe." She looked around frantically, her eyes searching for anyone, anything, some clue about who had left this child here to die. But there was nothing, just rain and passing cars and the indifferent city that kept moving, kept breathing, kept living, oblivious to the tiny tragedy unfolding under the bridge. Then she saw it, a folded piece of paper inside the towel, tucked against the baby's chest. She pulled it out with shaking fingers, careful not to drop the baby, and unfolded it. The ink was smudged from the rain, running in places, but the words were still clear enough to read. The handwriting was shaky, almost illegible, the writing of someone whose hands had been trembling. "Her name is Mercy. I am sick. I am dying. I cannot give her what she needs. I have nothing to give her, no money, no home, no future. Please love her. Please keep her safe. Please don't let her die alone like I will. God bless you. God forgive me." Faith read it twice, her vision blurring with tears that mixed with the rain on her face. Her chest tightened so much she thought she might not be able to breathe. She looked down at the baby, this tiny, fragile thing that someone had loved enough to leave behind. Mercy. Her name was Mercy. The baby had stopped crying and was staring up at her with wide brown eyes that seemed too old for such a small face. Eyes that looked like they had already seen too much, understood too much, suffered too much. Faith whispered, her voice barely audible, "Who would do this to you? What kind of pain makes a mother leave her child in the rain?" She wrapped the baby tighter in the wet towel, tucking the note back inside, and ran back to the taxi. Water splashed around her feet. Her lungs burned. But she held Mercy close, using her own body heat to try to warm the freezing child. Emeka's eyes went wide when he saw her, his mouth dropping open. "Madam, na baby that? This one is serious. Oh, yes, drive, now." Faith's voice was steady despite her shaking hands. "Drive to where?" Emeka asked, his voice rising with panic. "We need to go to the hospital. We need to go to the police station. This baby needs a doctor." "My house." "Madam," Emeka turned in his seat to face her fully. "Madam, we need to go to the police station. Oh, this one is serious. If you carry this baby home, you will find trouble. The police will ask you plenty of questions. They think you kidnap baby." Faith's voice was firm, brooking no argument. "I said my house. Drive." Emeka hesitated, his fingers drumming on the steering wheel, his face torn between doing what was right and doing what the customer wanted. Then he looked at the baby in Faith's arms, at the way Faith was holding her like she was made of glass, and he sighed deeply. "Okay, madam. But I will tell you, this thing will bring problems." He started the car and pulled back into traffic. Inside, Faith turned the air conditioner off and held the baby close, using her own body heat to warm her, rocking her gently, whispering words that made no sense but felt necessary. "You're okay now. You're safe. I won't let anything happen to you. I promise. I promise." The baby's cries grew softer, then stopped altogether. Her tiny body relaxed slightly against Faith's chest. Faith could feel the baby's heartbeat, rapid and fluttering like a bird's wing. But Faith's mind was racing, spiraling with thoughts she couldn't control. What was she doing? This was insane. This was illegal. This was dangerous. She couldn't just take a baby home like she was picking up groceries. There were laws, there were procedures, there were 1,000 reasons why this was wrong. But she couldn't stop herself. Something about this baby, something about those eyes, something about the way Mercy had looked at her in that moment under the bridge, pulled at a part of her she thought was dead, a part she had buried with Michael, a part she had locked away when the doctors told her she would never have children of her own. For the first time in 4 years, Faith felt something other than numbness. She felt terror and hope and love and fear all mixed together in a way that made her hands shake and her heart pound and her breath come too fast. The car was quiet now, except for the sound of rain hitting the roof, a steady drum that seemed to echo the beating of Faith's heart. She sat stiffly, her spine rigid, staring at the tiny baby in her arms. Mercy's eyes had closed, her small chest rising and falling slowly, each breath a small miracle. She looked so fragile, like she could break at any moment, like one wrong move would shatter her into pieces. Emeka kept glancing at the rearview mirror nervously, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Madam, I won't lie to you. What you're doing isn't good at all. If the police catch you with this baby, there will be serious trouble. They'll say you kidnapped her. They'll lock you up. You know how this country is. They arrest you first and ask questions later." Faith didn't answer. She was thinking about the note, replaying the words in her mind. "I am sick. I am dying." What kind of sickness? Cancer? AIDS? Something else? What kind of desperation, what kind of absolute hopelessness would make a mother leave her child under a bridge in the rain? How much pain do you have to be in to believe that abandoning your baby is an act of love? Emeka continued, his voice shifting into a pleading tone. "Madam, please, let's just go and report this. I know a police station in Oberländer. We can go there and explain everything. They will understand. You didn't do anything wrong. You saved the baby. They may even thank you." "No," Faith said sharply, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "No police." Emeka shook his head, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "Madam, are you sure you know what you're doing? This baby might have family looking for her. She might have a mother who wants her back. You might be bringing trouble into your home." Faith looked at him, her eyes hard and determined in a way that made him flinch. "Just drive." The rest of the journey passed in tense silence. Faith kept her eyes on Mercy, watching her breathe, counting each breath like a prayer. The baby's skin was still too pale, still too cold, but she was breathing. She was alive. That was all that mattered. When they reached Faith's flat, she paid Emeka double the fare, pulling wet Naira notes from her purse with trembling fingers. She looked him in the eye and said quietly, "Please, don't tell anyone about this. Please." Emeka looked at her for a long moment, his face torn with conflict. Then he glanced at the baby, and something in his expression softened. "Madam, I just hope you know what you're doing. But God will help you." He took the money and drove away, leaving Faith standing in the rain with a baby in her arms and a decision she could never take back. Faith stood at her door for a long time before opening it, her keys shaking in her hand. What was on the other side of this door? What life was she walking into? Once she crossed this threshold, once she brought this baby inside, everything would change. There would be no going back, no pretending this didn't happen, no returning to the numbness that had kept her safe for so long. She took a deep breath and opened the door. Inside, the flat was dark and quiet, filled with shadows that seemed to watch her. She turned on the lights and looked around with new eyes. This place had been empty for years. No laughter, no noise, no life, just her and her thoughts and the ghost of Michael that she still talked to sometimes when she couldn't sleep. The walls were bare except for one wedding photo. The furniture was minimal and functional. Everything was clean but unlived in, like a museum dedicated to a life that had stopped moving forward. She walked to the bedroom and gently placed Mercy on the bed, laying her down on the faded blue bedspread that hadn't been changed in months. She ran to the bathroom and grabbed every towel she could find, her hands moving frantically. She dried the baby carefully, slowly, like she was handling something made of crystal that might shatter under too much pressure. Mercy stirred but didn't wake, making small sounds in her sleep that broke Faith's heart. Faith found an old bedsheet, the softest one she owned, and wrapped Mercy in it, creating a cocoon that would keep her warm. Then she sat down on the edge of the bed and just stared, her mind blank with shock and wonder and fear. What now? She thought. What do I do now? I don't know how to take care of a baby. I don't know what babies need. What have I done? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, vibrating against her leg. It was Lilith again, calling this time. Faith stared at the phone, watching her sister's name flash on the screen, and let it ring until it went to voicemail. She couldn't deal with Lilith right now. She couldn't deal with anything except the impossibly small person lying on her bed. She stood up and went to the kitchen, her wet shoes squeaking on the linoleum floor. She opened cabinets, searching for something, anything that might help. She didn't have baby formula, she didn't have bottles, she didn't have diapers or wipes or any of the 1,000 things babies needed. She had nothing. But she had warm water and a little powdered milk that she used in her morning tea. It wasn't ideal, it probably wasn't even safe, but it was all she had. She mixed it carefully in a clean cup, testing the temperature on her wrist the way she remembered her own mother doing when she was young. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. She returned to the bedroom with a spoon and gently woke the baby. Mercy's eyes opened slowly, cloudy and unfocused, and Faith's heart clenched at how vulnerable she looked. She lifted her carefully, supporting her head the way she'd seen in movies, and brought the spoon to her lips. "Come on, sweetheart," she whispered, "just a little bit. You need to eat, you need to stay strong." The baby drank. Not much, just a few spoonfuls, but enough. When she was done, Mercy let out a small sound, almost like a sigh of contentment, and Faith smiled. It was the first real smile she'd had in years, the first smile that reached her eyes and made her chest feel warm instead of hollow. That night, Faith didn't sleep at all. She sat in a chair next to the bed watching Mercy breathe, terrified that if she looked away for even a second, the baby would stop breathing, would disappear, would turn out to be a dream she'd conjured from desperation and loneliness. Every small sound made her jump to her feet, every movement sent her pulse racing. At 2 a.m., she picked up her phone and stared at it, her thumb hovering over the emergency number. She should call someone, child services, the police, a hospital, someone who knew what they were doing, someone who could help this baby properly, someone who wouldn't make mistakes that could cost a life. But she didn't call. Instead, she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the dark room. "Just tonight. I'll keep her just tonight. Tomorrow I'll figure it out. Tomorrow I'll do the right thing." But she was lying to herself, and she knew it. Even then, sitting in that chair with aching eyes and a heart that was learning to beat again, she knew she would never let this baby go. But one night turned into two. 2 nights turned into a week, and before Faith knew it, days had blurred into a routine she hadn't planned but couldn't imagine giving up. She had bought baby clothes from Balogan Market, tiny dresses and onesies in soft pinks and yellows that made her cry in the store because they were so small, so perfect. She bought diapers from the pharmacy where she worked, sneaking them into her bag during her break and avoiding her colleagues' curious stares. She bought a small crib from Mrs. Ngozi's neighbor, who was selling old baby things, a wooden crib with worn paint but solid construction that she set up in the corner of her bedroom. She rearranged her entire life around this baby. She learned to wake up every 3 hours to feed Mercy, mixing formula she'd finally bought from a proper store. She learned to change diapers, at first fumbling and making mistakes, getting baby powder everywhere and fastening the tabs wrong, but gradually becoming more confident. She sang to Mercy at night, not real songs with words, just soft hums that came from somewhere deep inside her. Melodies that seemed to calm the baby when nothing else would. Faith discovered that taking care of Mercy was exhausting in a way she'd never experienced. It was relentless, demanding, with no breaks and no mercy of its own. But it was also the most meaningful thing she had ever done. For the first time since Michael died, Faith had a reason to wake up in the morning that wasn't just obligation. She had someone who needed her, someone who looked at her with complete trust and dependence, someone who made the emptiness in her flat feel like fullness instead. Her neighbors started asking questions, as neighbors do. Mrs. Ngozi from the next flat knocked on her door one morning, her round face curious and her eyes sharp with the particular interest of someone who made it their business to know everyone else's business. "Faith, my dear," she said, in her honey-sweet voice that always had an edge of interrogation underneath. "I've been hearing baby sounds from your flat for almost 2 weeks now. Crying, cooing, all of that. Do you have a visitor staying with you?" Faith opened the door slightly, keeping her body in the gap so Mrs. Ngozi couldn't see inside. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her face neutral. "No, it's mine." Mrs. Ngozi's eyes widened so much, Faith could see the whites all around. "Yours? Faith, when did you... I mean, you weren't pregnant. I see you every day. How?" "I adopted her," Faith said quickly, the lies sliding off her tongue with surprising ease. "Adopted? From where? Which agency? I didn't know you were trying to adopt. You never mentioned..." Faith cut her off with a tight smile. "It's a new agency. Someone at work told me about it. It all happened very fast. The paperwork was already done when they called me." Mrs. Ngozi looked suspicious, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Very fast. That's unusual. These things usually take months, even years, and you never mentioned you were applying." "It was a private matter," Faith said firmly, her voice leaving no room for more questions. Mrs. Ngozi's face softened slightly, her suspicion giving way to something that looked almost like sympathy. "Well, congratulations then. What's her name?" "Mercy. Beautiful name. May God give you the strength to raise her well." Mrs. Ngozi smiled, but Faith could see she was still puzzled, still not quite convinced. "If you need anything, you know where I am. Babies are not easy." "Thank you," Faith said and closed the door before Mrs. Ngozi could ask more questions. She leaned against the door and let out a long breath, her heart still racing. She had just lied, boldly, directly, to her neighbor's face, and she knew she would have to keep lying. To everyone, to her sister, to her co-workers, to anyone who asked about Mercy. The truth was too complicated, too dangerous, too likely to result in Mercy being taken away. But 2 weeks later, something happened that made all her lies catch up with her. Faith was at the pharmacy where she worked, standing behind the counter in her white coat, dispensing medications to a long line of patients. It was a busy morning, and she was tired from another sleepless night with Mercy, who had been crying more than usual. Her mind was only half on her work, the other half worried about whether Mrs. Ngozi's sister, who was watching Mercy, would know what to do if the baby wouldn't stop crying. Her phone rang. An unknown number. Faith almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up, some instinct that told her this call was important. "Hello?" she said, stepping away from the counter and into the back room for privacy. A man's voice spoke, deep and authoritative. "Is this Faith Okafor?" "Yes. Who is this?" Her stomach was already tightening with dread. "My name is Inspector Chidi Nwankwo. I'm calling from the Lagos State Police Department, Area C Division. We need you to come to the station." Faith's heart stopped. The world tilted sideways. She gripped the edge of a shelf to steady herself. "Why?" she managed to say, though her voice sounded far away, like it was coming from someone else. "We have some questions about a baby you may have found approximately 2 weeks ago on Echo Bridge during a rainstorm." Faith couldn't breathe. Her vision blurred at the edges. I don't understand." "Miss Okafor," the inspector's voice was patient but firm. "We have a witness who saw you pick up an infant from the bridge and leave with her in a taxi." The taxi driver filed a delayed report after consulting with his family. He was worried about the baby's welfare. "We need to talk to you about this situation, today. Before we continue, my dear viewers, please tell me, where are you watching from today? I love seeing your countries, your cities, your beautiful locations in the comments. Your support keeps these stories alive, so don't be shy. Drop your location below and let me greet you personally. Now, let's get back to the story. Faith's hands started shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. Her mouth was dry, her legs felt weak. "Okay," she whispered. "Come to Adeniji Adel police station. 2 p.m. Don't be late, Miss Okafor. And don't think about running. That would only make things worse." The line went dead. Faith stood in the back room for 5 full minutes, unable to move, unable to think, unable to do anything except replay the inspector's words in her mind. "We know, they know." Emeka told them. "They're going to take Mercy away. They're going to arrest me. They're going to take my baby away." She looked at the clock on the wall. 11 a.m. She had 3 hours. She told her supervisor she was feeling ill and left work early. She went home and found Mrs. Ngozi's sister in the living room, with Mercy sleeping peacefully in her arms. Faith paid her and thanked her, trying to keep her voice steady, trying not to let the panic show on her face. When the woman left, Faith sat on the couch with Mercy in her arms and cried. She cried in a way she hadn't cried since Michael's funeral, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. She held Mercy close and whispered, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I tried to keep you safe. I tried to give you a home, but they're going to take you away from me." Mercy woke up and looked at her with those old eyes, those eyes that seemed to understand everything. And Faith cried harder. At 2 p.m., Faith walked into Adeniji Adel police station with her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The station was busy, filled with people shouting, officers typing on old computers, phones ringing constantly. The smell of sweat and old paper hung in the air. A young officer in an ill-fitting uniform led her to a small interrogation room with grey walls, a metal table, and 2 plastic chairs. The room was hot and stuffy, with no windows and a fluorescent light that flickered overhead. Inspector Nwankwo was already there, sitting at the table. He stood when she entered. He was a tall man in his early 40s, with sharp features and intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through her. He wore plain clothes, dark trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. "Miss Okafor, please sit." His voice was neutral, neither kind nor cruel. Faith sat. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white with tension. She couldn't stop them from shaking. The inspector sat across from her and opened a manila file folder. He pulled out several papers and photographs and laid them on the table between them. 2 weeks ago, on the evening of Thursday, October 3rd, during a severe rainstorm, you picked up an infant from Echo Bridge near the 3rd mainland bridge connection. Is that correct? Faith nodded slowly, her throat too tight to speak. "I need you to answer verbally for the record." "Yes," she whispered, "and you took her home with you in a taxi driven by a Mr. Emeka Okonkwo." "Yes. Why didn't you report it to the police or to a hospital?" Faith looked down at her hands. I was going to." The inspector leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving her face. "When? After a month? A year? When were you planning to do the right thing?" Faith's voice shook. "I was scared." "Scared of what?" "That no one would care." The words came out in a rush, like a dam breaking. That she'd just become another number in the system. That she'd end up in some orphanage where nobody knows her name and nobody holds her when she cries. "I was scared she'd be alone." "So you decided to keep her?" "I decided to protect her." The inspector studied her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he said, his voice dropping lower, more serious, "Miss Okafor, do you know what child trafficking is?" Faith's eyes went wide with horror. "I didn't traffic her. I saved her. I found her dying in the rain and I saved her life." "That's what they all say." "I'm telling the truth." Faith's voice rose, desperate now. She was freezing. She wasn't crying anymore. She was dying. If I had left her there, if I had waited for the police, she would have died. I had to get her somewhere warm. I had to save her. The inspector held up a hand. "Calm down, Miss Okafor. I'm not accusing you of anything. Yet, I'm trying to understand your actions." He pulled out a photograph and placed it on the table. It was a picture of a young woman, thin to the point of gauntness, with hollow cheeks and sad eyes that looked haunted even in the stillness of the photo. She couldn't have been more than 22 or 23 years old. Do you know this woman? Faith stared at the photo, her heart aching at the pain she could see in those eyes. No. Her name was Blessing Adeyemi. She was 22 years old. HIV positive, stage 4 AIDS. She died 3 days ago in a free clinic in Mushin, alone, with no family present. Faith's breath caught. Her hand moved to her mouth. The inspector continued, his voice softer now, almost gentle. She left a baby on Echo Bridge 2 weeks ago. A baby girl. We found her medical records at the clinic. We found her identity papers. And we found a note she wrote before she died, confessing what she did. Faith could barely speak. What did the note say? She said she was too sick to care for the baby. She said she had no money, no home, no family who could help. She said she left her daughter in God's hands and prayed that someone with a good heart would find her. Tears were streaming down Faith's face now. She loved her. Yes, the inspector said quietly, she loved her very much, enough to know she couldn't keep her. He leaned forward, his voice becoming businesslike again. That baby is named Mercy Adeyemi, and right now, legally, she's a ward of the state. Faith's voice broke into pieces. No, please, no. We're taking her into custody, today, unless… Faith looked up quickly, desperately, hope flaring in her chest like a match struck in darkness. Unless what? The inspector paused, and for the first time, something like compassion crossed his face. Unless you apply for legal foster care, properly, through the system, through child welfare services. Faith blinked, not understanding at first. I mean if you really care about that baby, if this isn't just some temporary insanity, you'll do this the right way. You'll go to child welfare services, you'll apply to be a foster parent, you'll let them investigate you, let them do background checks, let them see if you're fit to be a mother. If you pass, you can keep her legally. Faith's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of hope, not despair. And if I don't pass? The inspector's face hardened. Then she goes to an orphanage or a foster home where they know what they're doing. And you face potential charges for child endangerment and failure to report a found child. You could go to prison, Miss Okafor. Faith stood up, her legs shaky but her resolve solid. When do I start? The inspector handed her a business card with a name and address printed on it. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Ask for Mrs. Adebayo. Tell her I sent you. She's tough, but she's fair. Faith took the card with trembling hands. Thank you so much. He looked at her steadily. Don't make me regret this, Miss Okafor. That baby has already been through enough. If you're not serious about this, if you're not willing to do whatever it takes, tell me now, and we'll place her with someone who is. Faith's voice was steady despite her tears. I'm serious. I would die for her. The inspector nodded. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Go home, spend tonight with her, but tomorrow you start the real work. The next day, Faith walked into the Child Welfare Services office in Ikeja. She was nervous, scared, but determined. A woman at the front desk looked up. Can I help you? Faith swallowed. I'm here to see Mrs. Adebayo. Inspector Nwankwo sent me. The woman picked up a phone and spoke quietly. Then she nodded. Wait here. Faith sat down and waited. Her hands were sweating. Her heart was racing. 20 minutes later, a woman in her 40s came out. She was short, round, with kind eyes but a serious face. Miss Okafor? Faith stood quickly. Yes. Follow me. Faith followed her into a small office. Mrs. Adebayo sat down and gestured for Faith to sit too. She opened a file and read through it silently. Then she looked up. Inspector Nwankwo told me about you. He said you found a baby and didn't report it for 2 weeks. Faith nodded. Yes. Why? Faith told her everything. The rain, the bridge, the note, the fear, the nights spent watching Mercy breathe. Mrs. Adebayo listened without interrupting. When Faith finished, Mrs. Adebayo leaned back in her chair. Miss Okafor, what you did was illegal. You know that, right? Yes. You could go to jail. I know. Then why did you do it? Faith's voice was soft. Because when I looked at her, I saw myself, alone, abandoned, forgotten, and I couldn't leave her there. Mrs. Adebayo's face softened slightly. Do you have any children of your own? No. My husband and I, we couldn't. I'm sorry. Faith looked down. Me too. Mrs. Adebayo closed the file. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to investigate you. Background checks, home visits, financial audits, psychological evaluations. If you pass, we'll consider temporary foster care. But if anything is wrong, anything at all, Mercy goes to an orphanage. Understand? Faith nodded quickly. Yes, I understand. Good. We start this week. The process was brutal. Over the next 2 months, Faith's life was turned upside down. Social workers came to her flat unannounced at all hours. They checked her kitchen, her bathroom, her bedroom, even her closets. They asked her neighbors about her character. They called her employer and asked about her work ethic. They asked questions that felt invasive and personal. Have you ever been arrested? No. Do you drink alcohol? Occasionally, wine with dinner. Have you ever used drugs? No. Have you ever had suicidal thoughts? Faith paused. Yes, after my husband died, but I got help. They wrote everything down. They made her take a psychological evaluation. She sat in a room with a therapist for 2 hours, answering questions about her childhood, her marriage, her grief, her mental state. Why do you want to be a mother? The therapist asked. Faith looked at her hands. Because I have love inside me that has nowhere to go, and Mercy needs that love. What if you can't handle it? Then I'll learn. What if her biological family shows up? Faith paused. Then I'll deal with it, but right now she needs me. The therapist wrote something down but didn't look convinced. Faith also had to take mandatory parenting classes. She sat in a room with other prospective foster parents and learned about child development, nutrition, discipline, and trauma. She learned how to recognize signs of illness, how to create a safe home environment, how to handle tantrums and developmental delays. Some nights, Faith came home exhausted and cried. The process felt endless. But every time she looked at Mercy, who was growing stronger and smiling more every day, she found the strength to keep going. Mercy was starting to recognize her voice. When Faith walked into the room, Mercy's face would light up. She would reach her tiny arms toward Faith and make cooing sounds. One evening, Faith was feeding Mercy when the baby reached up and touched her face. Faith's heart melted. She whispered, "I'm not giving up on you. Never." But then something happened that shook everything. 3 months into the process, Faith received a call from Mrs. Adebayo. Her voice was serious. "Miss Okafor, we need to talk. Can you come to the office today?" Faith's stomach dropped. "Is something wrong?" "Just come, as soon as possible." Faith's hands were shaking as she drove to the office. What had they found? What had she done wrong? When she arrived, Mrs. Adebayo's face was unreadable. She sat Faith down and pulled out a thick file. "We found someone." Faith's heart stopped. "Found who?" "Blessing Adeyemi's family, her mother." Faith couldn't breathe. "What?" "Her name is Mama Patience. She lives in Ajagunle. She didn't know Blessing had a baby. Blessing never told her she was pregnant." Faith's voice shook. "What does she want?" Mrs. Adebayo looked at her carefully. "She wants Mercy." Faith stood up. "No. Miss Okafor, please sit down. No, she can't have her. She's the biological grandmother, by law." "I don't care about the law." Faith's voice cracked. "I was there when Mercy was cold and hungry. I was there when she cried at night. Where was this woman?" Mrs. Adebayo's voice was firm but kind. "She didn't know the baby existed." "That's not my fault. It's not hers either." Faith sat down slowly, her legs weak. "This isn't fair." "I know, but we have to follow procedure. She has rights." Faith's eyes filled with tears. "Can I meet her?" Mrs. Adebayo nodded. "She's here, in the waiting room." Faith's hands were shaking as she walked into the waiting room. A woman in her 50s sat there wearing a faded wrapper and headscarf. Her face was tired, weathered, with deep lines around her eyes. She looked like someone who had carried too much weight for too long. She looked up when Faith entered. Her eyes were red. "You're the one who found my granddaughter." Faith nodded slowly. "Yes." Mama Patience stood up. Then suddenly, she walked over and grabbed Faith's hands. Thank you for saving her. Thank you for not leaving her in the rain. Faith didn't know what to say. Mama Patience continued, her voice breaking. My daughter, Blessing, she was sick. Very sick. She didn't tell me she was pregnant. She was ashamed. Faith's voice was soft. Why? Because I was already suffering. My husband died 2 years ago. I'm raising 3 other children alone. Blessing didn't want to be a burden. She ran away when she started showing. Faith looked at this woman and saw her own pain reflected back. I'm sorry. Mama Patience wiped her eyes. When the police told me what happened, I couldn't believe it. My daughter left her baby under a bridge and died alone. She looked at Faith. But then they told me someone found her, someone kept her safe, someone loved her. Faith's voice shook. Do you want to take her? Mama Patience's face crumpled. I don't know if I can. I have nothing, no money, no space. My other grandchildren are already sleeping 3 to a bed, but she's my blood. Faith took a deep breath. What if I kept her? What if I raised her, but you could visit? You could be part of her life. I would never take that away from you. Mama Patience stared at her. Why would you do that? Because Mercy deserves to be loved, and she deserves to know where she came from. Mama Patience started crying. She sat down and covered her face with her hands. You would let me see her? Yes, as often as you want. Even though I'm poor, that doesn't matter. Mama Patience looked up, tears streaming down her face. You are an angel. God sent you to my granddaughter. 2 weeks later, Faith, Mama Patience, Mrs. Adebayo, and a lawyer sat in a conference room. Papers were spread across the table. The lawyer explained everything. Mama Patience is voluntarily signing over guardianship rights to Miss Okafor. However, she will maintain visitation rights. She can see Mercy twice a month. Faith looked at Mama Patience. Are you absolutely sure? Mama Patience nodded, her eyes steady. Yes. I see how you look at her. I see how you fight for her. She needs that. I can't give her what you can give her. Faith's eyes filled with tears. But I'll make sure she knows you. I'll tell her about Blessing. I'll tell her where she comes from. Mama Patience smiled through her tears. Thank you. The papers were signed. Faith officially became Mercy's legal guardian. But just when Faith thought everything was settled, Mrs. Adebayo pulled her aside. There's something else you need to know. Faith frowned. What now? We found something in Blessing's belongings, another letter for you. Mrs. Adebayo handed Faith a sealed envelope. Faith's hands trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was shaky, weak but readable. To the person who found my baby, I don't know who you are. I don't know if you're reading this. I don't even know if you kept her or turned her over to the police. But I'm praying. I'm praying you're kind. I'm praying God sent you. My name is Blessing. I'm 22 years old. I'm dying. The doctors told me I have maybe 2 weeks left. I have AIDS. I got it from a man I thought loved me. He left when I told him I was pregnant. I can't take care of Mercy. I can't even take care of myself. My mother doesn't know about her. She has too many problems already. So I made a choice, the hardest choice of my life. I left my baby in a place where someone would find her. I prayed over her. I kissed her forehead. I told her I loved her. Then I walked away. It took everything in me not to turn back. But I knew if I did, I would never be able to let her go. Please tell her I loved her. Tell her I didn't abandon her out of cruelty, but out of love. Tell her I wanted her to live. Tell her I'm sorry I couldn't be strong enough to stay. And tell her thank you for being what I couldn't be. God bless you. Blessing. Faith read the letter 3 times. By the 3rd time she was sobbing. She folded it carefully and held it to her chest. She looked at Mrs. Adebayo. She loved her so much. Mrs. Adebayo nodded. Yes, she did. Faith whispered, how do I live up to this? 6 months later, Faith stood in a courtroom. Mercy was in her arms, now 1 year old, wearing a white dress Faith had bought for the occasion. The baby's hair was braided with tiny beads. She looked healthy, happy, beautiful. The judge, an older woman with grey hair and kind eyes, looked at them and smiled. Miss Okafor, I've reviewed your case thoroughly. I've read the reports from Child Welfare Services. I've seen the home visit evaluations. I've spoken with Inspector Nwankwo and Mrs. Adebayo." Faith held her breath. "And I must say, this is one of the most unusual cases I've ever seen." Faith's heart sank. "But it's also one of the most beautiful." Faith looked up. The judge continued, "You found a child in the rain, and instead of walking away, you stopped. You didn't have to. You could have called the police and gone home. But you didn't. You chose love." Faith's eyes filled with tears. "Therefore, I'm pleased to grant you full legal adoption of the minor, Mercy Adeyemi Okafor." The courtroom erupted in applause. Mama Patience was in the front row, crying and clapping. Mrs. Adebayo was smiling. Even Inspector Nwankwo was there, nodding approvingly. Faith couldn't speak. She just held Mercy tighter as tears streamed down her face. The judge smiled. "Miss Okafor, this child is blessed to have you, but I think you're just as blessed to have her." Faith whispered, "I know." Outside the courtroom, people were waiting. Mama Patience rushed forward and hugged Faith. "Thank you. Thank you for giving her a chance." Faith hugged her back. "She's yours too, don't forget that." Mrs. Ngozi from the flat was there with a small cake. "I knew you were lying about that agency," she said with a smile, "but I'm glad you did." Faith laughed. Even Lilith, her sister, had come. She hadn't spoken to Faith in months after Faith refused to lend her money, but today she was there. "I'm proud of you, sister," Lilith said quietly. Faith looked at her. "Really?" "Yes. You did something I could never do. You put someone else first." Faith's eyes filled with tears again. "Thank you." That evening, Faith sat in her flat with Mercy on her lap. The adoption papers were on the table, official, legal, final. Mercy was hers. She pulled out Blessing's letter and read it one more time. Then she looked at Mercy and whispered, "Your mother loved you so much. She loved you enough to let you go so you could live. And I promise I'll make sure you never forget her." She placed the letter in a small wooden box along with the original note from the bridge. One day when Mercy was old enough to understand, Faith would give it to her. She would tell her the whole story. The rain, the bridge, the choice Blessing made, the love that brought them together. But for now, Faith just held her daughter close and smiled. The storm had ended years ago, but the love it brought had only grown stronger. Faith Okafor, the woman who once lived in silence and grief, had found her purpose in the rain. And Mercy Adeyemi Okafor, the baby who was left under a bridge, had found her home. They were not connected by blood, but they were connected by something stronger: love, sacrifice, and the choice to say yes when the world expected them to walk away. And that, more than anything, made them family. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Sometimes the greatest blessings come wrapped in storms. Sometimes love finds you when you're not even looking. Thank you for watching, and remember, you never know whose life you might change with one act of kindness.